Hi, I'm Kristin Amdahl. Today is the first part in a new series of videos I'm going to make to show you how to decorate your tree completely in handmade knitted motif ornaments. This is the first year that my son has agreed that we can do handmade on the tree. I always like to collaborate with him. I know I can be a whirlwind, and especially when I get enthusiastic about handcrafts, to just take over the house. So I always like to incorporate his ideas, and this is the first year he said, you know what, Mom, go for it, make it all handmade, just make sure it's in red and green. And I said, sounds like a deal to me. The tree is green, so I'm going to take a little creative license there and do my ornaments in red and gold, with the tree being the green that he requested. I'm going to use my book, Knitting Outside the Swatch, to create all of the ornaments for the tree. The reference section in the front of the book has all sorts of knitted motifs worked in rounds, rows, short rows, all sorts of ways. And with a few extra simple craft tools, I'm going to show you how to take the motifs from the reference section of this book and make them into ornaments for the tree. In the first video, I'm going to show you how to make this ornament, which is from the Swagged Flower motif in the book. And I added a little jingle ball to it, and I made my own loop, hook, so to speak, for hanging it on the tree with just part of the tails of the motif. I did not stiffen mine because for the look of my tree I want it to be softer, more like I've added flowers, so I'm going to tuck it into the branches. But if you wanted a more structured look, you would want to glue or decoupage or Mod Podge your motifs to make them stiffer. So what I like to do with the softened motifs is just hang it where there's a little spot where I can tuck it in. For our first ornament, we're going to be using Knitting Outside the Swatch, and we're going to make the Swagged Flower. You'll need some yarn. I'm using a worsted weight yarn with a size 8 knitting needle. Depending on what size ornament you want to make, you could go up or down in yarn size, and you'll just want to use an appropriate needle for the yarn you're using. So let's say you were going to use a bulky, you'd use a bigger needle. If you were going to use a thinner yarn, you'd want a thinner needle. We're going to eventually need a yarn needle for weaving in our ends and tying our loop to make our hook on the ornament. And we're going to use a jingle ball today to decorate our ornament. And that's optional. You could use a bead, or you could just leave the motif as it is, as a flower ornament. We're going to start by casting on 14 stitches. So I start with a slip knot. So I'll wrap the yarn around my fingers, wrap it over the loop on my fingers, insert my finger in the loop created, grab that yarn in the back and pull it through. That is our slip knot. And then we'll tighten it onto our needle. Like that. So we've got our tail yarn here and our working yarn. Tail yarn in front, working yarn in back. We're going to wrap the tail yarn around our thumb, pull through with the needle and grab a loop with the working yarn on our index finger behind and put it onto the needle. We now have 2 stitches. We're going to do that a third time and fourth. Five. 6, 7, 8, 9, and as we move up, we just want to slide our stitches down a bit. 10, 11, 12. Whoops, I have a short tail, so it'll be a little trickier. 13. You just want to adjust if your tail gets short like mine did, and just adjust it up in your fingers and your thumb. So that's what 14 stitches casted on looks like. And now we're going to turn and begin our first row. The first row is to knit 2, purl 2 across the row. So we start with a knit 1, knit 2, and that's with the yarn in back. Now to purl, we push the yarn to the front, and then we work purl 1 and purl 2. Knit 2, and yarn in front for purl 2. And turn the yarn to the back, and we'll knit 2, then yarn to the front, purl 2, knit, yarn to the back, knit 2. Now we're going to turn our work, and we're working in a 2x2 rib, which means you're always going to knit the knit stitches and purl the purl stitches. So what's facing us now is purl stitches, so we're going to, and the pattern will tell you this as well, you're going to purl 2 to start this row, purl 1, purl 2 with your yarn in front, move your yarn to the back, knit 1, knit 2, yarn to the front, purl 1, purl 2, yarn to the back, knit 1, knit 2, yarn to the front, purl 1, purl 2, yarn to the back, knit 1, knit 2, and yarn to the front, purl 1, purl 2. Okay, so now we're going to turn our work. Now we're going to start working in short rows, and what that means is that on the next row we're not going to go all the way across the 14 stitches, we're only going to work across the first 12, then the next row will be going back. Then after that I'll be going to the first 10, back, 8, back, 6, back, 4, back. And we're going to do it together, but I just wanted to give you an idea. Sometimes it's the concept that's better to learn first before you start doing. So that's ultimately what we're going to be doing right now. And because of the nature of this particular stitch pattern, we won't have to do a wrap and turn, which is another process and another step that's for some types of short rows, such as stockinette. But don't worry, we're not even going to need it on this one. So the next row starts with knit 2, knit 1, knit 2, purl 1, purl 2, and we're just going to do this across the first 12 stitches of the row. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, so we're going to leave these 2 stitches unworked, turn our work, and now work back across those 12 stitches that we just did in the last row. So we'll start with knit 2, purl 2, and just work each stitch as it faces you. If it looks like a knit stitch, knit it. If it looks like a purl stitch, purl it. And if you're unsure, just follow along in the pattern. It'll spell out exactly which stitch to do for each one. Okay, so we did our 12 stitch short row. We're going to turn our work, and now we're only going to work across the first 10 and come back. So we'll start with knit 2, and pull some more yarn here. Okay, yarn to the front for purl 2, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So now we're going to omit the last 4 stitches on the needles, turn our work, and now we're going to start with purl 2, knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, and purl 2. Okay, so now we worked 8 stitches. On our next short row, we're only going to work on, let's see, that was 10. We're only going to work on the next 8 stitches. So we'll start with knit 2, purl 2, five, 6, 7, 8. Okay, we're going to skip the remainder of the row, turn our work, And now we'll work across those 8 stitches in pattern. Okay, on our next short row, we're only going to work across 6 stitches. We turn our work, and now we'll work in pattern over the first 6 stitches, knit 2, purl 2, and knit 2. Now we're going to want to turn our work, and we will purl 2, knit 2, and purl 2. Okay, and for our final short row in our first section on the flower, we are going to work over 4 stitches, so it'll be a knit 2 and a purl 2. I'm going to turn our work, and now we will knit 2 and purl 2. I'm going to set the work down now so you can see what our first section of short rows looks like. See how much longer it is on this side than that side? That's because we've gone down in smaller sections as we went along so that we would increase on the, so this will end up being our flower center. So now what we want to do is bring it all back together, and we're going to knit across all 14 stitches in pattern. Meaning we're going to knit 2 and purl 2. And then at the end of this row, I'll show you how to do, got to pull a little more yarn here. At the end of this row, I will show you how we do our first swag. Okay, so now we've worked across all our stitches. We're going to turn our work, and now with our working yarn, we're going to wrap it around all the stitches once and pull it snug. Wrap around all the stitches twice, pull it snug. Wrap around all the stitches 3 times and pull it snug. Now, in case you don't recognize your stitches here, you either need to refer to the pattern or just trust the pattern to know that on this particular row we start with the purl 2. So we're going to insert our needle with the yarn in front and purl 2, then knit 2, and now you can see that the knit stitch is facing. It's just on that first one, sometimes if you're unsure about yourself, you will have to refer to the pattern, because when the yarn is cinched tightly like that, you just can't see which way the stitch is facing. Okay, so now our first repeat is complete, and I'll set that down so you can see what it looks like. And you'll be able to adjust this as you go. It's going to be a little wonky in the beginning, but you can see where the swag has begun, and as we work our way around, it'll actually look more uniform. So now you want to repeat that all the way around. So what we're going to do is 6 repeats of this, meaning we're going to start now with working across 12 stitches only, omitting the last 2, then 10, then 8, then 6, then 4, repeating all the way across, swagging 3 times and knitting all the way back, and staying in our knit 2, purl 2 pattern all the way around. I'll show you as we do the second repeat together again. So we'll work across the first 12 stitches. Okay, we made it to 12. We're going to skip the last 2, turn our work, and now work across those 12 stitches only. Okay, we're going to turn our work now and work across the first 10 stitches only. I love this technique. I originally did it on a sweater, on a design many years ago. I did the yoke of the sweater with this swagged trim, and then picked up and knit along the one side of it for to do the body of the sweater from the top down. Obviously it wasn't short rowed on that one, and then later on I did it for the edging on a lace shawl in one of my books as well. And so it was just, seemed like a natural step for me. Oh, we went too far. That's what happens when you start talking. We needed to only work across the first 10 and skip the last 4. Turn our work now and work across. So anyways, I thought it was a natural progression to see what else I could do besides a linear line of edging with this swagged technique. So when I was developing the book, Knitting Outside the Swatch, I thought, what if I added short rows and I could get that beautiful texture of the swag, but also turn it into a geometric shape for a flower. So this ended up being a hexagon or 6 repeat petaled flower. Okay, so now we've gone and done our 12, our 10, we're now down to our 8. Knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, purl 2. So there's our 8, and we'll now turn our work. But before we do, I wanted to show you another thing. If you're unsure where you're at, if you pay attention, you can see where the holes are from where you've turned. See how these 2 stitches have one more stitch to them than these 2, and these 2 have more stitches than these 2. So you can see the steps. So if you're unsure where you are, either put a stitch marker there as you go. You would need the kind that clips on, not the kind that you slide on your needles, the split ring stitch markers. But if you need something to remind you, that would work. Or just if you're sitting in a quiet room, you can pretty much focus on this. It's not a lot of stitches to remember, but recognizing what the steps look like and also putting a marker to help you remember would be great tips when you're starting out. Okay, so now we're going to do our 6. Knit 2, purl 2, and knit 2. Turn our work, purl 2, knit 2, and purl 2. Okay, we're down to our last short row now, which is the 4-stitch short row. So we're going to knit 2 and purl 2. Turn our work, knit 2, purl 2. So now we're ready to do our row where we work all the way across all 14 stitches. And then after that we'll do our we'll do our 3 wrap swag. Okay, so that's what our second repeat now looks like before the swag. We're going to turn our work and we're going to wrap the yarn, pulling rather tightly, trying to keep it up near the needle, although you will be able to adjust it as we go too. We're going to pull tight, 2, 3 wraps, and then position ourselves for a purl stitch and pull kind of snug on that first stitch too. So we'll purl 2, then knit 2, and basically work in this same established pattern across all 14 stitches of this row. Okay, at the end of this row, we're going to do a little homework. You and I separately are going to work the remaining 4 repeats of our pattern. We're going to do, and I'll set it down and go over it with you real quick here. So what we're going to do, isn't that cute? It's really starting to look like a swag now. So anyways, we're going to do our short rows, our cinch, our short rows, our cinch, our short rows, our cinch. We're going to do that for a total of 5 times. We're going to work our short rows for the 6th repeat, but do not cinch then. We're going to touch base at the end of the 6th repeat of short rows, and I'll show you how we finish the whole flower then. All right, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 repeats completed, and we've worked our row of knitting that goes all the way back across and ties all the short rows together, and now we're going to bind off in pattern. And what that means is that you're going to work the stitches as they're presented to you. A purl stitch you're going to purl, and a knit stitch you're going to knit, but you're going to do it while you bind off. So let me show you how to do that. We're going to start with, this would be a purl 2, knit 2 across row. So we're going to start with purl 1, purl 2, and then do our bind off where we lift the first stitch up and over the second stitch and off the needle, holding on to the working yarn as we do it so that it stays taut. Then we're going to put our yarn to the back so that we can knit the next stitch because that's what's facing us. So you're going to knit 1 and then bind off that first stitch over the second stitch. The next one facing us is a knit stitch, so we'll knit that one and then bind it off. But now the next stitch is a purl stitch, so we're going to put our yarn in the front, purl that stitch before binding it off. Then the next one is a purl stitch, so we'll purl it first before doing our bind off. And then we'll push our yarn to the back because our next stitch is a knit stitch. Next one is a knit. So, you know, there's going to be 2 knit stitches and 2 purl stitches in the sequence. So you're just going to work the stitch as it is presented to you and then do your bind off separately. Whoops, and I got ready for a knit one. It's still a purl one here. So we'll purl and then bind off. Then we'll yarn in the back for a knit one, bind off, a knit one, bind off, and then a purl, bind off, and a purl, and bind off. So now I'm going to show you what that looks like. So in the next section, what I'm going to show you how to do is not only fasten that off, but how to sew these 2 edges together, work our last cinch, and then tie the whole thing together. Before cutting and fastening off the yarn, you want to pay attention to how long you make your tail. Obviously, when you're doing multiple things with that tail, the more the merrier, because you can't add more. So I'm going to go with about 2 feet. Just to be sure I have enough. I'd rather be safe than sorry. And we're going to fasten that off by pulling the tail through the last stitch. Just like that. Very simple. So now what we want to do is sew our bound off edge to our cast on edge. And we're going to use a yarn needle to do that. A wide eye yarn needle is best because it's easy to thread yarn through, especially worsted weight. So now I'm going to work back and forth from the right side to the left. We're going to start with just securing it on both sides. With a little knot. And then what I want to do is just make sure that I'm working into the same stitches. So if I'm going to do a stitch here in the stockinette section, whoops, I lost my yarn needle. So here's, and it's kind of ravelly there, so I might even just cut a fresh edge. See, another reason to have an extra long tail. Okay, so I'm going to make that tail a little bit longer to hold it in my hand. And if I'm knitting into a knit facing section, I want to sew into a knit facing section on the opposite side. Then the next section is a purl facing, working through about 2 stitches at a time. And then tightening it as you go. We're going to work through 2 knit stitches, or knit facing stitches on this side, so we'll do the same on this side. And if it's not perfect, it's okay. We are going to cover it up with that beautiful little cinch wrap. Okay, next we'll work into a knit facing section on both sides. And then the last one, this is purl facing all the way through to the cast on. Oh no, the purl facing. Both those, and then one more through the beginning of those rounds. Actually, it's rows. It looks like rounds now, but it really is rows. So now what we're going to do is wrap our yarn around the motif and through the center hole and pull it snug around that seam. And to be uniform with all the other cinches, we're going to do this 3 times. I mean, get it to where you think it's approximately the same length as the other ones. We can always adjust if it's not. There, that looks about the same. So now before going further, what I'm going to do is secure that with another little knot. And then I'm going to insert my needle underneath all of the wraps of all 6 of the cinchings. Just in that space behind them. You shouldn't actually grab any yarn, you're just going to work in that space behind all of them. And so even if you have any imperfections, this really hides them nicely. I'm just going to keep going and cinching until I think that they're going to all tie up together nice. There we go. So you want to just adjust your swags so the petals all look about the same, and we'll go through one more here. There. We'll push this to the back side of the work because to do my last knot, I think it would look better if we didn't see it on the front side, so I'll just weave through some stitches and pull a knot real tight. Look on the front to make sure that it looks fine, and it does. It really looks pretty just as it is. You could actually leave your ornament like that. I think attaching a bead here would be beautiful, or even a silk flower, but we're going to use one of these jingle balls and attach it like that. So what we'll do is come back now through the front with that same tail. And there's a hole on the back side of the jingle ball, which in essence makes this like a bead. So if you were doing a button would work really well for this too. So slide that through, go back through your center to the back side, and now you're going to want to secure that. Yeah, so you could use a bead, a button, a silk flower, a jingle ball like I'm using. Pretty much anything you can think of to make a flower center would be really, really cute. This one's messed up. I might end up painting that one because it looks like it's been scuffed up quite a bit, but I'll just paint it, it'll be fine. And we'll weave through a little bit here. Then what I want to do is weave through to the outer edge with this long tail still. Whoops. And then once I get to the outer edge here, I can make our hook. So I want this to be, about, let's say, 4 inches, or what's that? Going to be 5 inches. So we'll make a loop about 5 inches long. And we'll come through here, hold all of that yarn secure, as you tie a knot, because you don't want this to slide through. So we'll hang on to it. We'll hang on to it to secure it while we tie that knot a couple of times so that it doesn't slide. You don't want that loop now to get any bigger or smaller once you put it up on the tree. So we'll secure this a couple of times. And that'll leave our loop stationary. Okay, we'll weave in our ends. You know, if this was going to be a garment or something that got a lot of wear, I'd say really focus on your ends. I always do that, but it is just an ornament that's going to stay up there and not really be fussed with. So a couple times back and forth should do it. Trim that off. Then we have our beginning tail from when we cast on. We'll weave that one in as well. You know, if you're not into handmade decorating your Christmas tree, this is still a flower, don't forget. You could use this to embellish a hat or a bag or make it into just a pin for on your coat. You could make a picture frame with a bunch of these. There's all sorts of things you could do with a flower motif. Flower motifs aren't just for crochet, they can be for knitting as well. So here we go, we've got our second ornament ready for the tree. Let's go hang it. Join me next time as I take another motif from Knitting Outside the Swatch and create a new ornament for our Christmas tree.